Well, again, welcome. So one of the remarkable things I think about the pandemic has been the growth of homeschooling in the United States. And there's not really sort of official numbers on this, but the number of families choosing to homeschool maybe has doubled. Maybe Allison and Barbara can give more insight on that. And one of the first questions a lot of new homeschooling families or people considering homeschooling ask is just like, can my kids still go to college if they don't go to a conventional high school? And the answer is an unequivocal yes. And if you're wondering, like, how is that even possible? You've come to the right place. So we have an excellent panel assembled tonight that's going to walk us through the entire process from how to sort of manage the high school years as a homeschooler to how to search for the right colleges. And finally, what colleges are looking for in homeschooling applicants. And so we have Alison Snieckus, who's a former homeschooling parent and staff member at the Princeton Learning Cooperative, Barbara Rapaport from Rapaport Consulting, who helps families navigate the college selection application process. And we have Robin Lancaster, who is an admissions counselor, moving into some other roles, it sounds like, as well, at St. John's College that has campuses in Annapolis and Santa Fe. So each panelist will give a short talk, and then we'll open it up to your questions. And if you would like to be notified about more of our public events like this that we host, you can send a direct message in the chat to Katie Burke, who's on staff at PLC. If you want to give her your email, we'll make sure that we get you on the email list. Also, if you have questions for panelists as we go along tonight, you can just put them in the chat, and we will make sure to kind of feed those into our panelists when we get to the Q&A time. Okay, so with that, we're going to start with Allison tonight, and I will highlight her. And Allison, take it away.
All right. Hello. So yeah, I'm Alison Snieckus at Raritan Learning Cooperative, and I've been a mentor and a teacher at Raritan, but also at Princeton Learning Cooperative in New Jersey since 2012. And each year I've had the opportunity to work with a few young people and their families to apply to four-year college directly from the homeschooling high school years, and to package their unconventional path through high school into a form that college admissions staff understand. And prior to Princeton and Raritan Learning Cooperatives, I homeschooled my two sons and supported them to apply to college in the role of the homeschool supervisor. And actually, Barbara and I are pretty good friends. We go back to when I first started homeschooling. She's one of the first homeschooling families we met, and my younger son and her youngest are pretty close to the same age. And so that's been fun. And so, yeah, so we go pretty far back. So in this session, I will focus on applying to a four-year college as a freshman, with the understanding that this is not the only or the best path. Another excellent option that many young people choose is to start at community college and then to transfer to a four-year college. And many young people move into the work world following high school and then pursue further education kind of on an as-needed basis. So I want to start by talking about the years leading up to applying to college. Leaving conventional high school to homeschool or unschool or self-direct one's education offers the teen the freedom and flexibility to choose an educational path that best suits them. So with that, they're sort of leaving behind the school telling them exactly all the things that they're supposed to learn. So with this freedom and flexibility, if they have a strong interest in something, they can go more deeply into that topic, spend more time on it, and other things can take a bit of a back seat or be aligned to that interest. So for instance, a young person who's super interested in history might be reading historical fiction for English rather than the more sort of conventional books. If they're not sure what their interests are, they have time to explore options, to try things out without the penalty of getting a bad grade or having to stick it out in something for the rest of the semester or for the whole year, and then discover, it's just not for me. And an example of this that I've seen over the years is Japanese. Lots of kids are into anime and manga, and they're like, wow, I really want to learn Japanese. And then we get them set up with a tutor, and they get started on it, and they're like, wow, there's multiple alphabets, right? It's actually really hard to learn Japanese. And they're like 2 or 3 months in, and they're like, oh, geez, I don't know that I want to continue this. and decide to discontinue like their study at that point. But that's not to say that they haven't learned some important information that'll like suit them well later on. Like they may choose to like learn Japanese later, and they'll know like what it takes to get into it at that point. And so we find that to be like super helpful to the young person to sort of be able to reflect on their learning and how to make choices about different things. If a young person really wants to learn something and is not finding success in what they're doing, they can try a different method. You know, maybe there's a different way of going about to learn this that works better for you. And depending on their needs, they can move faster, take longer to study a topic than a conventional school class. So like my older son, I think he was 2 years working on geometry. It just, you know, he wasn't working very hard on it, and it worked out fine. He's an engineer. He's done a ton of math since, but it just took him a while to sort of just get going and get through it. And it just wasn't a problem. So there's the freedom and flexibility to do that without having to get an F in the class. And colleges understand all of this, has at least been our experience. Many colleges list recommended academic courses on their website that kids should complete in preparation for applying or attending that college. Our experience at the Learning Cooperatives has been that there's often wiggle room on this, that colleges get that homeschoolers live their lives, often without much regard to what's academic and what's extracurricular. Colleges are quite flexible on what can count for various recommended courses. So here's some that you'll see typically on this recommended list. So English can be reading books you're interested in, discussing them with friends and family, and then writing about them in a personal journal. You know, a lot of colleges require that a student has done foreign language. So you could do Spanish study, can be traveling to a Spanish-speaking country or being part of a Spanish-speaking community in the US, watching movies and TV shows in Spanish, and working through a grammar workbook. A history course could be watching historically based films and documentaries, visiting historical sites on vacation, following a history-related blogger online, and volunteering at the local history museum. But really, it could be about what the young person is interested in and what they want to do, and that can be bundled together to make a course that can be on a transcript. So to communicate what a teen has done during their high school years, we recommend using a narrative transcript, so which includes a rich description of their unconventional studies. We work with high school age teens to document all of the things that they're doing in their lives, and then use that raw data to create the narrative about each of the courses that represent sort of this self-study that they've done. And a transcript is a record of what the applicant has studied in their high school years, and it's not to be confused with a diploma, which certifies that a person has completed the required curriculum. Most colleges do not require a diploma in the application, but they all require a transcript. Now, it can get a little bit tricky, you know, navigating the college's requirements for homeschoolers. What I've seen is that colleges tend to require that the homeschooled applicant meet the graduation requirements in the state they're located in. So the homeschool graduation requirements in the state, and the homeschool requirements vary tremendously across the different states. And so that can be a problem for a young person who's applying out of state to another college. They're like, wow, I can't get a superintendent's letter or something like that. And then the college will say, as an alternative, you know, you could include a score report from the general education diploma test, the GED test. Well, I'm happy to talk about like how we've approached this, that taking the GED is not the only recourse. You know, a lot of people think, oh, geez, I have to take the GED to go to the school. We've had some success with some other methods. So if anyone's interested, please ask that. We could go into it a little later. In the application, a parent of the homeschooler serves in the guidance counselor role. They sign and submit the official transcript. If using the Common App, they answer the questions about homeschooling philosophy and methods. They can also write a letter of recommendation, and lots of homeschooling parents do this. Some colleges use their own systems for the application process. And in these cases, it's best to talk with the admissions office about how to handle that homeschooling application so that you can fit in with sort of what's happening for conventionally schooled applicants. So I've met scores of homeschoolers over the years since 2000, and everyone who has wanted to go to college has gone. And often, I have to say, they've gone to their first choice college and found it to be quite a rewarding experience. So I'll leave it there.
Great.
Pass the baton.
All right, thank you, Alison.
Yep.
Yeah, next we're going to move to Barbara Rapaport. I'll spotlight you and take it away.
Thanks. So thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel. It's always so much fun for me to talk to homeschooling families. It's something that I've been doing since I homeschooled my own 3 children. Alison mentioned that we met when our youngest kids were around 10.
Yeah.
So that little boy is now a 30-year-old who has a PhD in music theory and composition and is in his 2nd year of law school. So to let you be reassured, all 3 of my children homeschooled all the way through high school, and for them, the right choice was going to college. They followed a variety of paths. One of them was a musician who went the conservatory route. The other 2 went to liberal arts and sciences colleges. And I've been working with homeschooling families on applying to college for about 15 years now. And they've all had tremendous success, just as Alison said. So if that's the right path for you, you can certainly get there. So how to begin? If you're a homeschooler who's had the opportunity to help mentor your kids through learning the way Alison was describing, you're going to be in a really good place to start that process. The first thing that you want to think about is, what does your student need to thrive? And when I ask that question, I'm really looking at 3 kind of big buckets. I'm looking at the academic piece. What does the student want to learn? And what's the best way for the student to learn that? Are they somebody who has a very narrow interest because they've had a lot of chance to explore things on their own through internships or independent study? Or are they somebody who's really interested in studying things very broadly? That's going to lead them to different kinds of schools. How do they learn best? Are they somebody who soaks up information best in sort of a lecture situation? Are they somebody who does better sitting around a seminar table? Are they somebody who likes to read great books and then discuss them? They should be looking at St. John's, right? Are they somebody who really likes to have their hands on things and manipulate things to try to figure things out, right? So that's the academic bucket. Then there's the social bucket, which is really very broadly, what are they doing at school when they're not in a classroom or in a laboratory, right? So it's like everything else. How close or how far from home do they want to be? What kind of environments, like climatological environment, do they want? Are they somebody who wants to be by the beach? Are they somebody who needs to be in the mountains? What kinds of clubs would they enjoy participating in? So as homeschoolers, what kinds of activities have they been engaged in that they want to continue to be engaged in? And how are those opportunities available to them at college? Sometimes the opportunities may not be available right at the college. Maybe they're available in the town adjacent to the college, but it all sort of fits that social bucket. And finally, there's the financial piece, which maybe your student hasn't had the opportunity to think about, but as the parent, I'm sure you have. Here in New Jersey, the cost of attendance for a public university is hovering around $32,000 a year. For some of the liberal arts and sciences colleges that are private, the cost of attendance is over $80,000, right? So what's your family's budget? What kinds of merit or need-based aid might your family be eligible for? So those are the kinds of questions that you want to ask as you're starting to think about which colleges might be good fits for you. So once you've got those questions answered, I guess the next best thing to do is to look at a search engine that lets you set different parameters for the search. So, and Joel, I guess I'm not sure what's the best way to share these with everybody. Maybe I'll put them in chat when I'm done talking. So College Navigator is a federal website that probably has the greatest amount of aggregated data for colleges and universities in the United States. So you could go on that website and you can select regions of the country or particular states in the country. You could select size of student body. I think you can put in major. And then when you look at any individual college, there's just really a wealth of information there, including what the colleges prioritize when they're looking for applicants who are good fits for them. And that information comes from something called the Common Data Set. So if you want to do a deep dive for any college, that's probably the place I would look. So if you Google Common Data Set and then the name of whatever the school is, you can find all sorts of information. So I guess that would be the first pass for looking at colleges that are good fits. And then I'd go to the college website. I'd do a virtual tour. And if the college looks like it's a college that would be a good fit for your students, I would search the college website for application requirements for homeschooled students. Because as Alison said, some schools are going to ask you to provide documentation that you may or may not have, or that you may or may not want to gather. When you're using a narrative transcript, there's oftentimes not objective information there. And I know, I'm guessing Robin will speak to this a little bit. You know, since COVID, we're living in mostly a test optional environment, but in my experience talking to college admissions counselors, it's yes, we're test optional, but if you're a homeschool student and you have test scores, that's really helpful to us, particularly if you haven't done something like take a class at community college. We need some objective way to look at your learning. Not all colleges, but many colleges, as I said. Robin will probably speak to that a little bit more. All right, I think I'm at my time limit.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara. Now move the spotlight and move us on to Robin. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. It's really exciting to be here. My name is Robin Lancaster. I'm Associate Director of Admissions at St. John's College. And I'll get in just a second into exactly what St. John's College is and who we are. Let me say, as a theme, I have to join the ranks of our other presenters. I'm actually the product of homeschooling, at least for a little bit. I was homeschooled from kindergarten through 3rd grade, at which point I went to what was essentially a homeschooling cooperative, and then went to a fairly normal early college high school and attended St. John's. So let me just talk a little bit about my purpose for this conversation is to talk a little bit about the features of an application that colleges are going to be looking at when they're reviewing your homeschooled student for admission to their college or university. let me say first that my conversation, what I have to say, is going to be colored substantially by the institution that I work at, and that'll be true of every representative you talk to. So let me stress first and foremost, it is important to understand the nature of the school that you're applying to. If it's a big public school, there are going to be differences in how you interact with that school and how early you need to start your lines of communication than a smaller liberal arts college where the staff might be more available to talk to because they don't have 30,000 records to manage. So let me just say a little bit about St. John's so you know where I'm coming from. So St. John's is a small liberal arts college. We have 2 campuses in Annapolis, Maryland, Santa Fe, New Mexico. We have about 950 undergraduates total, and we count about 10 to 15% of those students as homeschooled at any given time. And a big reason for that is that our curriculum is pretty distinctive. We're what's called a great books college. Our curriculum is entirely discussion based. So everyone is talking to their classmates all the time. There are no lectures, no textbooks, no tests anywhere on our entire curriculum except for a music notation quiz and a single algebra test in your sophomore year. And so, as you might imagine, for students who have been educated differently or are interested in an education that does more than just provide them an opportunity to listen to someone relate the answers to them, St. John's is quite appealing. And so the reason I cover all of that is first, so you know where I'm coming from, and second, to highlight just how distinctive many colleges in this country can be and how important it is to understand differences between the colleges that you are considering or that your student is considering. So let me say first, one of the most important things that we look for when we're reviewing an application to St. John's is this quality called fit. And what that means to us is slightly different than, as you would imagine, it means to every other college in the country. But it boils down to the academic preparedness and intellectual propensity towards the things that we value as an institution. St. John's wants students who are excited to talk to one another and to talk about books, to talk about big ideas. And so what we look for in the application is the preparedness to engage in those kinds of conversations in a way that will be productive, and the enthusiasm to do it, because in discussion-based classrooms, there's no getting around someone who's not having a good time. So for us, when we're evaluating the fit of a student, we're going to look at a number of things. And Alison and Barbara have said is spot on. Having a narrative transcript is extraordinarily helpful for us to understand your student's journey through their high school years. Because when we are looking at an application, we want to see that a student has challenged themselves, has taken classes that are difficult for them, but also has found a passion, has found things that excite them and engage them. Because a student who knows a little bit about what they find exciting and also is willing to challenge themselves is going to be an excellent fit for our institution. So seeing that opportunity to challenge yourself combined with a real passion for the subject material is present in the transcript is much, much easier in homeschool transcripts, where you have a narrative version of that student's education that lets the admissions counselor into this process. Now, I will say, at St. John's College, we practice one of the more holistic reviews that you'll find in the country. And that's a term that I think is a good term to be on the lookout for as a homeschooled student on colleges' websites. If they say they perform a holistic review, that often means they have admissions counselors available, paying attention to the nuances of your student's transcript and able to really try and understand where your student is coming from and what they care about. So fit is this first component that we're looking for in the students who are applying to St. John's. A component of that is important to demonstrate is preparedness. Preparedness can look a little different. Alison's already alluded to it, that students who are schooled differently or are coming from a homeschooled background often have sought that particular mode of education because they were interested in learning subjects that weren't taught in the high schools that they had available to them, or they were interested in learning in a way or in a style that wasn't available in the schools around them. And so while that's extraordinarily productive for the student and often makes them better prepared for college in our experience, it's really important for us to have some kind of additional measure where we're able to understand how the choices that the student made will translate into our academic program. For traditionally schooled students, we have a couple of familiar metrics. AP courses are a national standard for the most part. They vary by instructor, but they're a way for us to know a little bit about the kinds of coursework the student has done. This gets a little tricky when you start talking about honors courses in traditional schooling, where honors courses at one school are the most difficult courses offered, and at another school, there's 80% of the students are enrolled in honors courses. And so it's part of the admissions process is sorting through all of that information about what a student has done, the rigor of their coursework, as well as the breadth of their coursework. And so as homeschooled students, one thing that can really improve your chances of admission, but also just make it much easier on your admissions counselor, is either some kind of external measure. So whether that's standardized test scores, although your student might not be particularly interested in standardized testing. So another really, really excellent option, if your student has the time and the interest, is community college courses or courses taken at another institution or through some institution of traditional learning that just give us a sense of, okay, your student has explored the things that are interesting to them and has pursued the methods of learning that are most productive for them. How did that translate when they entered an environment like the environment they might find at St. John's or like they might find at any other school they're applying to? So I would encourage you as you're planning out your students' trajectory through their high school years to consider giving them opportunities to try themselves in traditional classrooms. And if they struggle, that's not necessarily a problem. That's not necessarily a bad thing from our perspective, because it gives you information. And then what we would look to see is if a student in their sophomore year took a college math course and it proved too challenging for them, and then they, in their senior year, took a more advanced or a similar math course and aced it, that shows real development and real skills on the part of the student to adapt in the face of adversity, which is going to be absolutely essential for their ability to succeed in college. And so don't be too wary of striking out and trying some of those community college courses because they're incredibly useful for us in admissions. I would say the other component of fit that we are looking at St. John's and that all colleges are looking at is the quality and personality of the student. This is most essential to us in smaller schools, and you'll notice this much more commonly highlighted on the websites of smaller schools, that they're looking for students of a particular intellectual stamp or a particular kind of interest. That primarily has to do with the fact that at a place like St. John's, we have 500 students, and you're going to have to get along with those folks. And part of getting along with them is sharing interests, sharing excitements, and sharing passions. And so finding a way as a student to talk about what drives you and how to emphasize the things that make you want to learn is going to be incredibly important. And furthermore, tailoring your college list so that those things that you're able to write passionately and honestly about are also the things that you see reflected being written passionately and honestly about on the college website or in the college materials, or that you saw in the classroom when you visited campus. I'm going to talk about two more things really quickly. They are first and foremost the college application essay. Now, essay requirements differ from college to college. You will see them much more commonly in settings in the small liberal arts college settings in schools like St. John's or other small liberal arts colleges. We are a Common App school. We offer our own application. We're also part of the Coalition for College. We try and be available wherever we can. We don't charge an application fee. We just want people who want to be at St. John's to apply. But we do ask one thing of students that falls outside of the norm. We ask students to write a minimum 400-word essay. Most college essays are a maximum of word count. We have a minimum word count. We ask our students to really take that opportunity to think and spend time with a book of their choosing and demonstrate to us in that essay the qualities of mind and the passion for the work that they need to have in order to be successful at St. John's. And so that's one of the most, between the essay and then an on-campus interview or a virtual interview, which is much more common these days, if you are able to demonstrate to the colleges that you're applying to a real sense of understanding of what they do and what their mission is and how you would fit into that as a student, that's perhaps the most powerful thing you can do, assuming that you're applying to a school where you're going to get eyes on your application. So that is one important distinction. Sometimes when you're applying to a larger school, you'll be asked to write an essay. It's totally worth doing because if they have to choose between you and another student with similar test scores, that essay may make the difference. But especially if you're applying to smaller schools, taking time to understand and align yourself with the main goals of that institution in your essay and find institutions that you can naturally align yourself with is absolutely critical. The final thing that I want to talk about is sustained engagement. One of the things that we see homeschoolers being the most successful at out of all the constituencies that apply to St. John's is early interest. We've had 7th graders or 6th graders come to campus and tell us, this is the place I want to be. And I am not saying your student needs to know their college list that early. They absolutely should not. It's terrifying to me when freshmen come in and they have a college list of 20 schools. I made my college list between the summer of my junior year and the beginning of my senior year. Maybe a little late in today's terms, but for me, it worked just fine. And I think applying to college should be equal parts terrifying and thrilling. But one thing that colleges, especially smaller colleges, are always looking for in their applicants is a real understanding of the institution and a sustained interest in it. And so if you can visit campus, if you can interview, colleges keep records of this. If you attend an event with the college admissions counselor, they're going to see, and that may make the difference between, if they're asking the question, I have thousands of records, who's really interested in being a Johnny, or who's really interested in being a mountaineer, or whatever other mascot you can come up with. The answer can often be, oh, well, this student's been to campus 3 times and they really understand what we're about and they really want to be here. And so if you have the ability to do that kind of sustained engagement with the institutions you're applying to, those will be the 3 critical factors that an institution will be looking at is interest, ability, and passion. And I think if you can demonstrate those 3 things in your application, you are going to be pretty well set to apply to any institution. And I hope you apply to St. John's, obviously, but whatever institution suits you, because that passion has to come naturally to you. College shouldn't be something you just do. It should be something that thrills and excites and changes your life. And so being able to sincerely believe that that's what you're going to get out of this project will come across in your application and will make a world of difference to someone like me who's reading hundreds of them. Because I can tell you, those homeschool applications who really want to be here, they stand out like nobody's business. So thank you. I guess I hand it back over to Joel before we take questions. I saw some come through in the chat, but I don't want to jump on them.
Yep. Yeah, great. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, so we're going to move on to questions. So if you have questions that you'd like the panelists to address, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll kind of feed them in. While people are typing, we did have one way back just asking about, sort of GED, but also sort of alternative success routes, as they put it. So I don't know if some of the panelists want to talk about the role that plays or can play, and to kick us off while we're waiting for other questions to come in.
Yeah. So I could say a little bit more about sort of where I started on from that. And so what we've experienced is that, so we're in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, there's no homeschool requirement. So we've had a number of kids apply to colleges out of state. And sometimes it'll, like, along the process, along the way, they'll realize, oh, geez, this college requires some things that I can't show because we're in New Jersey. And an example is SUNY Stony Brook. So they have 3 options for homeschoolers to sort of demonstrate that they've completed their homeschooling in their state. And so they could get a letter from the superintendent. They could send a score report from the diploma test, a GED, but there are more than just GED tests. The HiSET is also available as a diploma test, or they can have 30 credits from college courses previously. So these are kids who, don't have the 30 credits of college and can't get the superintendent's letter, and they're like, well, so what do we do? And we tried it early on. We tried having the parents appeal this issue and send an email or a letter or talk to somebody in admissions and say, yeah, we're from a state where we can't get the superintendent's letter. But in our state, homeschooling parents can self-certify the completion of the curriculum. And so they send along the state law and sort of how they explain how their homeschool fulfills these state requirements. And I think in all cases it's worked, including at SUNY Stony Brook, which I was so surprised when it worked there. But there have been a couple of cases where this has worked. So it feels like it's useful to try it. Of course, the applicant can always go and take the GED or the HiSET and sort of get the high school curriculum certified in that way. But it seems useful to give it a try if this is your situation. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add one small complicating factor to be aware of is there are some interactions between high school graduation as a homeschooled student and the availability of federal student aid. So if that's an issue that you have, that if federal student aid is going to be a part of your process, it's just important to get smart early on how your students' graduation status will interact with the availability of need-based federal aid.
Yeah, and I can comment on that too, is like there's some documentation on the Department of Education website that basically says that homeschoolers can, as long as they've, working within their state requirements. So whatever it is that their state requirements, as long as they've fulfilled those state requirements, then they can apply for federal financial aid just fine. So it's, useful to look at what you need to do in your state, and how that interacts. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a question. Maybe we'll start with Robin on this one. Any big never do that mistakes you'd mentioned for homeschoolers applying to college?
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything. I guess I love specificity, but I don't have anything that comes precisely to mind. I would say one of the big pitfalls that I see in homeschooled student applications is your student is exceptional, and that is a big part of why they are schooling in the way they're schooling. But it is important for the admissions process to make sure that you are giving them a fair shake as an evaluator. So the homeschool applications that I have been most concerned by have often reflected of the parents' love as much as the student's performance. And so I think it's important as you're working on your transcript and your student's record to make sure that you are really carefully treating the preparation that your student has done for an intense academic environment or for a specific academic environment of any kind, whether it's a conservatory program or anywhere else. And then I guess the other piece that I think homeschooled students especially need to be wary of, not that all high school students are fabulous writers, but it has been my experience in more than a few homeschooled cases that homeschool students, because of the flexibility they've been given in developing their voice and style in writing, they can sometimes go a little off the handle. I got a 35-page essay, and we do have a word minimum, but a 35-page essay from a homeschool student was a little much. And so I think it's important as you work with your student on their applications to as they're writing any application essays to make sure that they're being precise, that their writing is clear, and that they're really addressing the prompt of the essay. If their writing has not to that point been like it might have been in a traditional classroom where they are being schooled on not that the 5-paragraph style is particularly virtuous, but it does induce brevity in a lot of students. And so just making sure that your application essays really reflect the skills of your student, and that they're responding to the prompt and what's being asked of them.
Yeah, we had a good question that came in. I'll broaden it a little bit. The question was, are 504 plans given in college? I'm wondering if people could just talk more, just about accommodations in general at colleges and what to look for if that's something that your family is considering.
I can answer.
Yeah, I was going to say Barbara would be a good one.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would, I think the thing that you want to do is get in touch with the Office of Disability Services, is usually what it's called at any college, and talk about what diagnosed learning difference your student has, and ask what kinds of support there is for your student. Hope that answers your question.
And I just want to add that the office also exists at community colleges. So so you want to do it at both community colleges and colleges, is visit the Office of Disability Services. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we had a question about sort of objective measures. So, someone's applying, is the ACT, SAT enough? Should they include AP testing along with that? Is there any sort of like sweet spot in terms of objective measures?
It will vary by school. I would say the SAT and ACT have been the gold standard for a long time. There are the winds of higher education are blowing, and those tests and their ubiquity is changing quite a bit, but they are still excellent measures of a certain skill set in students. That is the ability to sit for 2 to 3 hours and perform well on a set of material that they should roughly know in order to be successful at college. There's a reason that a lot of schools are going test optional, and so you should be on the lookout for that language on school websites. Some of them have stayed test optional, most notably the University of California system in California. But many schools went test optional during the pandemic with the unavailability of testing centers, and many have stayed that way. And so as that requirement changes, it's important to keep an eye on what other objective measures might be available. The SAT, ACT, the classical learning test, or AP scores can be good. There's lots of different objective measures, but SAT and ACT are absolutely fine, I would say, in 99% of cases.
Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah. I could add too, like, I think it serves well. So they're not exactly objective, but, taking community college courses, you talked about that before, Robin, and that is, we have seen that to be just really, I think, helpful. So not only just helpful for the student to say, yeah, I'm going to be able to do this, right? And to feel confident about their ability to get back. For some kids, get back in the classroom. Some kids haven't been in the classroom ever. And so it's their first time sort of seeing that sort of formal way it works, and, helping them experience both, if you can, both online and in person, I think is useful, because a lot of classes are going to have options in both cases, moving forward. And I think it's not objective, but it can really sort of like pull together, and sort of demonstrate that, yeah, this person has the sort of academic and capabilities to be able to do the coursework at a college. And there's also some other tests. The CLEPs aren't, so they canceled the SAT2s. I think at the end of 2020, or was it the beginning? I'm not sure, but it's very recently. All of a sudden, the SAT2s were subject tests that a lot of homeschoolers use to validate their learning, in different subject areas. And so those aren't available anymore, but there is a college level examination program. The CLEPs are offered at most community colleges at their testing service, at their testing center. You could just go in, make an appointment, take the test. And they're not accepted by a lot of colleges, but, like reporting those scores as part of your narrative, you could say, yeah, I studied chemistry, did this, blah, 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 took the CLEP test, got this score, right? So that's a validation, and helps sort of provide some objectivity to what you're saying in your sort of narrative part. And homeschoolers give grades, right? So homeschoolers need GPAs when they apply to college. And so it's important to have a process for that. And different homeschoolers use different processes. The process might even like change a bit across the different courses. Some courses can be super objective because the kid has done this and they took these tests and it was easy to grade them, and you could just give them the grade off the test and it's all verified. Others are more subjective. So I don't know if that helps. Barbara, you probably have some more you can add on.
Yeah, I was also going to throw in there. So like not a test, because I mean, if you're like me, you hate taking tests, but other things. And I wouldn't push kids to do competitions in anything that they didn't love doing. But for example, if your kid liked mock trial, it's a competitive kind of thing, right? And you can, if they are on a competitive mock trial team, maybe they're winning a county championship and you're putting that in there. Or if they love history, maybe they're competing in National History Day. So those kinds of activities exist if your kid enjoys them is really the big piece of that. So just some non-testing objective measures too.
Yeah, and there was a couple just real quick add-ons to that. So in terms of objective measures, is there any difference in like what actual content is in the community college classes that you're taking? Does it matter if you're taking science or math or art? And does it matter if instead of community college classes, they're doing classes at like four-year universities and summer programs or something like that? Does any of that make a difference?
Well, so I'd say it's two things. I'd say one is demonstrating the ability to be with a group of people in a more traditional academic setting, right? That's like reassuring to whoever's reading the application. Yes, this kid can sit with other kids and do this kind of learning. In terms of kinds of class, probably something that would be like in the core, right? So English, math, science, social studies, world language, rather than like in art, unless they're looking to go to art school.
Yeah, let me just piggyback off the back of that question and then try and answer the second half of your question, Joel. So I think it can be important if you are going into, if your student has a specific major they're interested in, it can be really beneficial to take coursework that is in the same subject area as that student's major, just to demonstrate to the department that, because some colleges will have actual faculty review an application, and the faculty tend to want to see preparedness for their coursework. And so being able to take something that's in the subject area of their expected major. And then to wrap the second component, I think it will differ from school to school. I would say I think at St. John's, there's very little distinction between courses taken at a four-year university and at community colleges. I mean, we've all read about the glut of some types of poorly paid educators, associate professors. There are phenomenal educators at America's community colleges, and they are really the backbone of higher education in a lot of ways for most people. And so I think the coursework that's done at the community college level, the name recognition really isn't on our minds as admission counselors. You know, if I'm seeing a community college, I'll use College of the Redwoods, the community college that I took coursework at in high school. If I see that, or I see Harvard University Extension School, neither one's really going to make a difference to me. The question for me is, did the student excel in areas that are going to lead them to be successful here at St. John's? I don't know that that's objectively true across the world of admissions counselors, but it's hard to be awed by a particular name, because the coursework that's going to be offered is going to depend quite a bit on the educator and quite a bit on where the student is in their journey. And so I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about the name of the institution where your student is taking college level coursework, just that they are, if that's something that interests them.
Great. We had kind of a group of questions talking about transcripts. And so one was, course description, should they be extensive or more of a summary? Can we just do a, more, as opposed to a narrative transcript, can we just do a conventional straightforward one? So I wonder if we just can talk about, transcripts in general, best practices, anything that would be useful for folks.
Want me to jump in first?
Sure.
Okay. So what I routinely hear from college admissions officers is that they need to know the context of learning. So the summary is helpful in that it lists the courses, and it's sort of easy to check off. Yup, 4 years of English. Yup, they did calculus or algebra 2, whatever the math level is. So it's sort of a fast visual of course material that was covered. But what physics meant at your homeschool is an unknown to the admissions person who's reading it, right? So if they're getting a transcript from a public or private school that they're used to getting students from, they have an understanding of what physics means at that school, but they don't know what physics means at your homeschool. And that's where the narrative comes in. You can describe the concepts that were covered, the materials that were used, the environment in which the learning happens, and that really helps the application reader have a better picture of what learning was like for your student.
Maybe I could add on to and in doing this homeschool transcript, that first piece, what we look to do is to put all of the high school learning on that first page. So it may be that a young person went to 9th grade in a conventional high school, and they're going to have a transcript from that high school, but we're going to repeat all those classes on the sort of, and we call it a summary because it's nice for the admissions. And I could see Robin shaking his head. Yes, it's nice for the admissions to have it all together in one place. Right. And so they don't have to sort through, oh, they did 9th grade at this one. And then, okay, so what did they do there? And then what did they do over here? And then there's the homeschool in addition. So we put all from all the different providers that the young person studied with, we put it all together on a summary that's all in this table right on the first page. And they could look through that. And then we follow up. I think Joel put this in the chat before, but we follow up with a narrative that describes the things that are unconventional. Right. So so the things that they might have done at a homeschool resource center or as self-study or as internships in places or done things in just a different way.
Alison, that brought back an answer that I should have given to the first question, which is the most difficult homeschool transcript I ever had to read did not have that first page, but furthermore, included the grades in the narrative. They weren't offset or put at the top of the page or anything like that. You had to read each paragraph to find what grade was given by the homeschool administrator during each course. And so that was a good 40 minutes I spent reading this 30-page description, trying to locate all the grades so that I could calculate the GPA. So anything you can do to make it easier on the admissions counselor on the front end with that page is greatly appreciated and probably makes the read a lot smoother and easier on their side.
Yep. Real quick question, Robin, what is your time like this evening? What time do you need to hop off?
I am good until you no longer need me.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go a couple more questions. There was a couple sort of on this this kind of thread here. So someone was asking about how grades and GPAs are calculated for homeschoolers, and then also a question about, should 8th grade classes be left on there? Is it just high school courses? So maybe we'll just wrap up this sort of transcript questions and then we'll move on to some other topics.
Well, I could talk about like developing grades for homeschoolers. So this, obviously the grades that they got in any in a community college class or from a provider, an online high school type class, or from when they were in conventional school, those are all the grades that they're going to use for those. And you want to be like, you don't want to be changing those, right? So like you have to like put them on, be honest about them. There's a lot of trust here that's happening. You could put, you could take a snapshot of those transcripts and add them as sort of the last pages on your PDF, just sort of paste them in at the end. And then admissions folks, if they want the official from the school, they can ask for that. So that we've done that in a number of cases. And then you get to the ones that are really self-study, or they've worked with a tutor, or they've been in some sort of homeschool resource classes at a like learning center. And there we use much more of a holistic review. So looking at the work that they've done and how much they've learned, and in discussion with the young person, it's like, how much did you learn here? Like, what can you recollect? Like how did that essay, so when you got feedback from, the teacher that you were working with, how did that go? Like, did you make the revisions? Did you get it to be like this really nice piece, and so like in conversation about, about the learning, and it's really remarkable how I feel that kids are probably dead on to what a teacher would give them had they been in a class and were being evaluated by a teacher. I really think, when they're asked in that way, that they can really provide that information. And if you have any, like, if they've taken, like, if they've used Khan Academy, like it's going to keep track of what they know and how they've mastered it. So you could say, well, look, you mastered all of Algebra 1. And they might say, oh yeah, but it took me like more than a year to do it. And I'm like, okay, so don't give yourself an A. Like, so what do you think? And they might say B+. I'm like, okay, you put the B+ on there, but you learned all the material and it's evidence in your, in the thing that was tracking it. So, so we think about it, we talk about it and come up with something. We also want it to fit with the other things that they've done, right? So we don't want to be like saying, oh, I'm A+ in all my self-study stuff, but, I got a C, when I took that community college class. It's like, oh, well, that's not really going to fit together. And you probably need to think about this a little bit. Or if their SAT scores are really fabulous and they're like, yeah, but I don't want to put all A's on my transcript. I'm like, yeah, but you have like 700s on your SATs on the 2 sections. And like your community college classes were all A's. you need to give yourself all A's. It's okay, right? You could do this, because it really represents you're quite a good student. You write fabulous stuff. You really do your work, and you're consistent. So I think it helps. I think they enjoy the process, I could say. So, and then the actual GPA, it's a weighted average. So we evaluate each of the courses to see how much credit. We use a sort of 1 means a whole year, half means a half a year, and so a whole year they have to have done enough to sort of represent what a high school class would look like if that class were in a high school. Some of them wouldn't be in a high school, so we just sort of have to think, if it were in a high school, would this count enough? Sometimes we look at community college classes and look at the description of what would be covered in that class, and if what the young person has done is similar to like sort of the objectives in there, we could say, all right, so that might be weighted about the same amount, and then we calculate the weighted average from there.
Yeah, just the second half, is there any situation where you would be putting 8th grade stuff onto a high school transcript?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so so at times kids have done high school level studies in 8th grade or 7th grade, and yes, we would I would recommend that they put it on, and I would say label it as 8th grade. The admissions persons, Robin can probably shake his head, is like, it's okay, I could skip over that part. I could recalculate. If you've given me all the raw data, I can recalculate their GPA. I probably wouldn't put the grades from those classes into the GPA. The GPA would probably be just based on the high school level classes. But for a kid who sometimes kids want to do it. They're like, well, what about algebra 1? I did that in 8th grade, or I did algebra 1 in 7th grade, and I did algebra 2 in 8th grade. What about them? They're like, yeah, they're high school level studies, so let's just put them on and just say where they go.
Great. So we have a couple kind of categories of questions that have come in here. So one question was about aptitude tests and things like to help kids gauge their interests and personality, and whether college is a good idea for them or not. I know, Barbara, you probably work with people thinking about whether college is the right place or not. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure that the aptitude tests are what I would use to gauge whether college is a good fit or not. So there are sort of 2 broad categories of aptitude tests. One is, I guess, like a personality test, right? How's your personality compare to the personalities of other people who've done that kind of a job, right? So it's really your interests, and your interests can change over time. Then there's like actual personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs personality test, and the theory behind that is that whatever your personality is what your personality is. That's not changing over time. And then there's tests that are that look at your current like math and language abilities. But I wouldn't look at any of that in determining whether college is the right place for anybody to be in this moment. That's really more of a conversation with the student, I think, about what their interests are, and whether they need to take some time when they're done with their high school studies to explore the world a little bit through travel or through internships or through work, or whether academic studies that aren't related to something like a trade are the best thing for. I don't know of any test that's going to tell you that. I don't know, Robin, if you do.
I would say I think a test like that could serve a useful purpose as a starting place for a good conversation about what college ought to mean to my student. But I'd be very wary of as with every objective measure created by human beings, there is always going to be room for change and room for self-reflection around that. So I think it can be useful as a starting place if you sit down with your students, say, hey, we learned this. This is what this test said about you. What do you think about that? That seems like a productive conversation. But I think beyond that, you know, it's your student and yourself having that conversation, and they should be the ultimate ones because making that decision, because they're going to be the ones going through 4 years or 2 years, or you know, if they go on to get a PhD, 35 years of schooling, however many. So it's important to start those conversations with whatever tools you have available to you, but really finish them with your students and their goals and their aims.
Great. Yeah, we had another kind of collection of questions relating to you know, applications that would involve more of like a portfolio kind of thing. So, you know, or performance, or, you know, so there's a specific question about conservatories, you know, artist portfolios, someone who's really into tech and does like a lot of projects, but maybe not, you know, sort of formalized classes in certain areas. Like, what's the best way to capture, like, any sort of thoughts about how to best present that?
Okay. So conservatory study is sort of a different animal than like a maker portfolio for engineering. So let me address those two things separately. If you're somebody who's interested in pursuing one of the performing or visual arts, chances are the kind of degree that you're looking for is either a Bachelor of Fine Arts or a Bachelor of Music. And in those cases, you're probably going to have to demonstrate where you are with your art at this moment. For artists, that is a portfolio. For visual artists, that's a portfolio. And Googling ACAD, AICAD, will give you a lot of good direction about how to put a portfolio together. There are ACAD schools that'll look at your portfolio and give you feedback on it. That could be really helpful. For performing arts students, the college application process is a little bit more intricate and should start a little bit earlier. You are going to probably need a pre-screen that you submit to colleges. So it's going to be a recording of your performance, whether it's acting, musical theater, vocal, or an instrument. So you're going to be asked to demonstrate where you are with your performance in this moment. And you'll probably also have to write some kind of an artist statement, right? Why are you interested in this art? What's your journey been so far? And those pre-screen requirements, the application deadline for the submission deadline for those is usually around October 1st. So it's earlier than like the early application deadlines for most colleges and universities. And then the college will, the faculty members will look at that pre-screen and let you know whether you're invited for an audition. So there's a couple different parts for that. For the maker portfolio, usually that's for students who are interested in engineering, industrial design, that kind of thing. The requirements are going to vary by school. For the most highly selective engineering programs, what we're hearing is, unless you've got some really extraordinary thing that you've accomplished, don't submit a maker's portfolio. Just submit the application and write to us. This is my short answer for that.
Yeah, but you know, in terms of the tech though, like I've worked with, a couple years ago, I worked with a boy who was at RPI, and he was able to write about the things he did inside that narrative. So again, you have that freedom and flexibility, and you could say, I created a robot and competed at the firefighting tournament in 2021, and we got this place, we didn't even get off the starting line, or whatever happened, however it went. And so they don't necessarily need I think for the tech side, they can talk about programs that they've written. I wrote a program in Python that is that does this particular game. I wrote it from scratch, and here it is, and whatever. And you can always put in your essay, you could talk more about like the process like working on those if you have opportunity. And there's in the Common App, even if there's no like sort of essay required by there's always one in the Common App, and then there's other additional fields that you can put additional information in. So you could say if your essay didn't really cover the kind of thing you wanted to say about this, you could put a write-up about some sort of like project that you did and how it went in one of the other fields, and it would be fine. So I think there's other ways in the tech ways than just sort of like the usual coursework. Doesn't have to be just physics. You could do some other things.
Great. We had two kind of questions, sort of I guess plan B kind of questions. So one was just, if I don't get any colleges that I'm interested in, is sort of doing a year of internship work experience and reapplying a good option? And then also someone was asking about gap years. Should they apply and defer, or just, wait for a year? So I'm wondering if, anyone wants to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't get in to someplace that you want to go, don't go someplace you don't want to go. That's a waste of your time and money, right? Spend the year doing something else, working, interning, traveling, helping out your community, right? There's lots of ways, productive ways you could spend your time. I think the standard wisdom for gap years is apply to where you want to go and get in, and then ask to defer your attendance for a year.
Yeah, I will. I think everything that Barbara just said is absolutely right. Don't just go to college because you feel like you should. You want to have a project, you want to have a purpose going there, because it's a very expensive decision, and it's one that you want to make intentionally and for the right reasons. So if you don't get in, take a year to think about, if you're able to get some feedback from the admissions department about what it was that they saw in your application that they wanted to see more of. Find a way to pursue those interests and develop those skills over that year off. And we've seen that some of our strongest students were initially denied 1 year, went out, got more experience, and came back to us and became phenomenal members of our community. So it is something that we're always very aware of. The only exception that I can think of to the second piece of advice that Barbara gave, I think that is absolutely the wisdom that I would provide you with. Apply, look at, assuming the gap year policies allow for you to have that year or 2 years. Most schools are just going to say the 1 year. So check the plans ahead of time if you're looking for a longer period. The one exception I would think of would be if you as the student, or you as the support person for your student, feel like there's something major missing from the application. Don't feel like, one of the great advantages of being a non-traditionally schooled student is you don't have to be 18 years old and go off to college. If you feel like there's a hole in your education that you want to fill, take the time to fill it. And then your application will not only be more impressive, but you yourself, the student, will be more ready for that college experience. And so that'd be the one exception, I think, to the apply and then defer advice that I can think of.
Here with a question: is there anything to be worried about if someone's applying to a four-year school as a freshman, but maybe they've taken too many community college classes? Is there any limit to what would be, is any of that would be considered problematic?
So I think the time well, first of all, shouldn't worry about it. It's not going to be a problem. But it's really a question of, are you applying as a first year student, or are you applying as a transfer student? Mm-hmm. So if you've taken courses on a degree path and you've actually earned an associate's degree, and then you're applying to a four-year college, you're applying as a transfer student.
I think they were asking applying as a freshman.
Yeah, no, then you're, unless you have that associate's degree, because you're calling that, if you're taking those classes as a homeschooled student, then they're dual enrollment, right? They count as high school and college. Mm-hmm. So I haven't seen any problems with that.
I read as Barbara does, we read the homeschool to college, email list where people talk about their experience on this. And exactly, there's people who talk about, like my son or daughter, they got all the way up to the associate's degree, just don't get it. right? It's like you can go all the way right up to the edge, just don't do that last course, so that you get the associate's degree. And there is talk about, like, is there too many, community college credits? And Barbara would know, but I just feel like perhaps there are colleges out there that would say this is too many, but you don't have to submit them, right? You could just make them be high school classes that you did and say, no, these aren't going to be passed on to college, right? This is just how I did my high school studies, is with community college classes. And so it's not a problem, right? It's only if you're really submitting them and saying, oh, I have all this college credit already. But you could certainly say, no, they're not really college. They're on my high school transcript.
Yeah, that's right. I think the issue arises if you're asking the college to evaluate them for credit, because most colleges are going to have some sort of residency requirement, right? You have to earn this many credits from our college.
Okay. So maybe five more minutes. We have one question about how important are extracurricular activities on a homeschooler application? Any suggestions on how that can be highlighted within the application?
So I think one of the challenges for homeschoolers is deciding what's an activity and what's a class, right? Because we're learning all the time, right? So how do we parse that out? And really, the important thing is that you're not double dipping, right? If you're somebody who plays guitar, and you're saying that you took a guitar class, that's not also your activity. But if you're taking guitar lessons and then you're also in a band, maybe it's both. You're right. So it's a little bit more art than science. But I think as for any student, colleges want to know that you've been meaningfully engaged in something important to you. And as a homeschooler, you've got a lot more time to do that because you're not sort of sitting in a class doing a lot of busy work, wasting time.
Yeah, I'll just underscore that to say, I think that the big thing that we're looking at the college admissions level is to see that students are going to be meaningful members of our own communities, that they're going to engage, whether it's in athletics or the arts or just student leadership on campus. We want people coming to our college who are going to, we are small cities in some ways. We thrive based on the happiness of our citizens who just happen to be our students as well. And so it's incredibly important to us that your students demonstrate a real willingness and excitement to become involved in their communities. But Barbara hit it on the head. Oftentimes on a homeschool transcript, the line between what a class is and what an activity is quite blurred. But I actually don't think that hurts students in most cases, especially, certainly not in our admissions process, because we're reading them carefully enough to be able to see that students are engaging with their community, and it's just part of their coursework, part of their learning.
Great. Maybe one last quick thing. Does anybody have anything they can say about NCAA guidance for eligibility in homeschoolers? Then maybe that would take longer than the 4 minutes that we have, but does anybody have any quick things that they would like to
So
talk
they publish a booklet for homeschoolers. So I look at on the NCAA website, the NCAA rules and regulations change every year. Yeah.
And I can suggest get on Groups.io. It's it's like an email list, and it's HS, like high school, the number 2, and then it's COLL. So maybe somebody could put it in the chat. HS to call, and there's lots of folks on there. It's thousands of homeschoolers. HS meaning homeschool to college, and thousands of homeschoolers on there. And there's lots of folks who have been through the process of the NCAA, applying with NCAA, eligibility so that their young person could compete in that college. So you'll get lots of advice there.
Yeah, until they make croquet an NCAA sport, I don't think St. John's is gonna weigh in too much on this particular question.
Well, great. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up. So thank you very much to our panelists, Barbara, Allison, and Robin. It was really, really fantastic. Before we hop off, if anyone, if you registered through Eventbrite, you should already we have your email. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with resources and a copy of the chat and a link to this video that we'll post. And so if you're not on that list, please, before you jump off, send a direct message to Katie at the Princeton Learning Cooperative with your email, and she will make sure you get a copy of this. But I think that's it for this evening. So again, thank you all for being here, and hopefully it was helpful. Good night.
Right.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Right. I don't know if you're getting off, Barbara, but see you later. See you on Friday. See you on Friday.
Yes, I look
You
forward
need to
to it.
stop the recording so that my
Oh,
see you on
right.
Friday. Yes.
Yeah.